Black Desert Online is a Korean MMORPG made by Pearl Abyss that came out back in December of 2014 and still has a very healthy player base here in 2023. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering some information about the game, my personal pro and cons list, and what type of player I think will and will not enjoy BDO. And my goal by the end of this video is that you will know if BDO is an MMORPG that you should give a shot or revisit if you've tried it in the past. Now, don't get me wrong, Black Desert Online is definitely a tough game to get into as a new player, especially if you've never played it before and you're coming from a traditional Western MMO. But I have a ton of beginner guides for most things that you could pretty much want to know as a new player on my YouTube channel, so feel free to check out the Black Desert Online playlist on my channel page. But before we do get into today's video, guys, I do just want to thank today's sponsor, Ewin Racing. I've been using an Ewin Racing gaming chair for my stream setup for a long time now, and I absolutely love it. It's got all the things you would expect from your gaming chair. It's got a lumbar pillow, it's got a neck support. You are able to move the back up and down. Of course, you are able to ascend and descend with an arm on the side of the chair, and you are also able to move and adjust the angle of the armrest, which can be really handy depending on where you have your mouse positioned. The build quality of the chair is really good. It's extremely comfortable, and I'm able to sit in this thing for hours with absolutely no issue. If you want to pick up a chair for yourself, I personally have the Champion model. You are able to go onto Ewin's website and shop their current available listings. They have some current deals and ongoings on their homepage. You can then look at their list of gaming chairs as well as their new line of gaming desks and find some specials of what they have on for sale. You can pick anything up from their store for 30% off using code DOTS at checkout and clicking the link in the description below. So now that we are back from the ad break, let's jump into the About section for Black Desert Online. So BDO is a buy-to-play game with a microtransaction store. Packages start as cheap as $10, but BDO does often give the game away for free on Steam or through its own website, so there are tons of ways to get into the game for very cheap. BDO is set in a high fantasy universe, and the game is a sandbox MMO, so you pretty much can do whatever you want, whenever you want. Because it's a sandbox, there's a lot of freedom, and it always feels like there's something to do. Now, the combat in Black Desert Online is probably what most people have heard about, and it is definitely very different from other MMOs because it is an action combat game that honestly plays a lot more like a fighting game. It's definitely got a very unique combat system, but the combat is extremely fun, and the hype behind BDO's combat is definitely well backed up. There is technically no level cap in BDO either. Progression is nearly infinite in this game. You will hit soft caps though, don't get me wrong, at like around level 61, 62, where the time to level up does get incredibly high, but as long as you're doing something in the game to gain experience, you'll always be progressing your character in some way. Also in BDO, level past like 61 or 62 really isn't that important. You do get some minor stat bonuses, but the main source of power comes from your gear. Now, BDO also has 27 classes in the game. It's got a lot of classes, and they are gender locked. The way that classes work in this game in terms of general progression is that you'll start with your class's main skills, and when you hit level 56, you will get quests to unlock your Awakening skill line, which gives you a secondary weapon and a whole new skill tree to place points in and get abilities from. However, if you've really enjoyed your class's base skills and don't want to use that new Awakened playstyle, you can instead choose to empower your base skills through what is called the Succession tree. Now, BDO has very in-depth professions, which in this game are called life skills. All of the life skills are very unique in their own way, and the way they're designed really gives them an old-school MMO feel, and they have a lot of depth. The housing system in BDO also is a pretty deep system, although I will say housing is a bit more limited compared to other MMOs. There were some expansions done to the system with like mansions in the game and some improvements that have been done. And while the housing system in BDO is overall okay, I still find housing in games like ESO and Star Wars: The Old Republic to be superior. You have the ability to purchase a ton of various houses in whatever city you want, and the houses can serve different purposes. You can use them to unlock additional bank storage, use them as a personal residence where you can put, crafting tables and furnish the house to your liking, or like little things you hang on the wall that give you buffs, and you can also turn them into workshops for your workers to craft items for you. BDO also has a worker system where you can send NPC workers to gather resources for you while you play. The worker system definitely has a bit of a mobile game feel to it, where you have so much energy to spend to hire workers, and that energy replenishes over time, and then you have to have a certain amount of housing for the workers, and then you send the workers to nodes around the map to gather items for you or craft items in houses. Now that actually segues us into nodes. So a node is simply a place that you've discovered on the map that has a node manager. So for example, I went to this farm, I talked to the node manager here, and then as you can see on the map, I unlocked the node. And then I can invest contribution points, which is a type of point that you earn from doing a variety of activities in game, to unlock the ability to send workers to the node, assuming I have another node connected to it. It's kind of like a spider web kind of deal. And then I can spend energy to have the worker go to the node. So TLDR is you hire workers, and then you send them to various places on the map that you've discovered to farm materials, and you need to spend types of basically different currencies or points to make these things happen. Now, I do have a beginner guide on my channel for this system if you do want to learn about it more in depth, but I just wanted to give a brief overview in this video since it is a pretty big system in the game, although it does kind of operate in the background, which is pretty cool. Now, the game's PvE consists primarily of mob grinding and world bosses. However, the game does have 2 dungeons at the moment that can provide quite the PvE challenge for those who do want to undertake them. But for the most part, the PvE content in BDO is mostly mob grinding and world bosses. However, the mob grinding isn't like always totally mindless. It's not like you just always one-shot packs all the time. At higher end spots, mobs do have mechanics, and failure to maintain certain buffs and debuffs and attack the mobs in certain ways and group them up in an intelligent manner can very easily result in your death. So it's fun though, because it gives the grinding like a bit more depth to it instead of just like running around one-shotting everything. Now, the game does have a ton of PvP options, which such as node wards, which are basically like hold and defend your like base while you fight against other guilds and try to destroy their base, team deathmatch, open world PvP, guild v guild, and more. Do note though that open world PvP is not opt-in, it is on all the time. Some areas are safe zones, but if you're in a combat zone, anyone can attack you. Now, this doesn't mean that players are just going to, farm you left and right. If a really high gear player attacks a lesser geared player, they lose something called karma, which makes them attack on sight by guards in towns, and then they have to stop attacking players and grind mobs to put themselves back in good standing. Also, there's a lot of guild politics when it comes to world PvP, and you can very easily start drama between guilds attacking each other continuously. So you honestly, though, don't really have to worry about getting harassed and like people just like killing you, because there isn't like a crap load of benefit to it. But the main reason you will have that is that if you're encroaching on someone's grind spot, and if they're there for a while and you just start trying to grind over them, people will honestly try to kill you so that you kind of get out of their way. Also, new players, don't worry. When you start, you'll be able to access servers for a few weeks where world PvP is completely disabled to give you time to learn the game and progress your character. This game does not run off a mega server system. It runs off of like a channeled system, kind of like old school RuneScape. So if someone is deciding to be rude and just unprovokingly attacking you a lot, you can just freely change realms. If you also never want a PvP, you can lock your character at level 49, since PvP is not enabled for characters above level 50. Perlabis also has actually implemented a new form of PvP, a gear equalized PvP called the Arena of Solaire, which offers a gear equalized, everyone on the same playing field arena mode into the game that I have personally loved and will discuss a little bit later in this video. The game focuses a lot, very heavily on character progression. Since there is no traditional PvE, the main focus is on PvP, progressing your character via leveling, mob grinding, and gearing, and silver making via life skills or grinding mobs, or just getting treasures to basically add levels of convenience to your account. The game also has an in-depth guild system. Guilds have a lot of meaning in Black Desert Online. You can declare war on other guilds. Members get paid for being in the guild based upon agreed upon contracts from the guildie and the guildmaster. You can do guild quests. One of the PvP modes, Castle Siege, allows you to fight for ownerships of towns. Guilds take a lot more management in this game due to the dues and contract systems. So if you're thinking about making a guild in Black Desert Online, I would definitely do some research before you make yourself a GM. Now, gear also has no level in BDO. It instead has attack power and defense power ratings on the gear, depending on if it's a weapon or a defensive piece, as well as some other bonuses like accuracy, evasion, etc. However, I do have a guide on my YouTube channel that goes into these stats more in depth. Gear can be enhanced to increase the potency of the stats on the gear as well. The game also has something called season servers, which basically act as a fast-paced way for you to get started in Black Desert Online. And if you are new to the game, I highly recommend starting your character on a season server. You have to complete certain goals as you go through the early parts of the game, and you get a lot of extra rewards for completing these goals. And it's really puts your account in a very, very good spot when the season is completed. The game also does have a central auction house known as the Marketplace that can pretty much be accessed from anywhere. Now, in the past, BDO has not had fast travel, but we do kind of have fast travel now with the Magnus. It's like a side quest that you can complete through the Black Spirit Companion that you have, which you will learn about if you start playing the game. And you can get like kind of fast travel where you can travel between different wells on the map, but you have to specifically run to a well, then go into the well, then it will take you to another point across the map. Horses in this game, I think a lot of people will typically use to get from point A to point B. But if you like really need to go like super across the map, the fast travel points through the Magnus are definitely a very welcomed addition. And I do have a Magnus guide on my YouTube channel as well. BDO also has an in-depth pet system. Pets help auto loot and have a ton of different perks, tiers, etc. Thankfully, you will get a bunch from the main quest line to help you get started. BDO also has a very in-depth mount system. Different types of horse tiers, types, skills for the horses, geared for the horses. You can breed the horses, you can enhance horses. There's a lot you can do with them, and the mount system is a very, very big part of the game. And surprise, I have a guide on it on my YouTube channel as well. The game also has sailing too, so you can explore the open seas to do fishing, trading, hunting sea monsters, and have your own crew of NPCs and more. Now, guys, with the about out of the way for Black Desert, let's move into my pros. And the first one being is that it's a sandbox. So with the game being a sandbox MMO instead of a theme park MMO, there's a lot of freedom and it always feels like there's something to do. And something that I've learned about myself over the years is that I definitely prefer a sandbox game over the on-the-rails vertical feel. The main reason is because everything you do in a sandbox game, from dailies to weeklies, tasks, whatever you choose to work on, you're making that choice. You're not forced to do anything, and you can just do whatever you want when you log in every day. And that's something that I like a lot about sandbox style games, and it's something that I think BDO does very, very well. BDO also does have very engaging combat. In my opinion, it is one of the best MMORPG combat experiences that I've ever had. The combat feels very fluid. The spell effects and the audio make it feel so impactful, and you feel really tied into your character. And BDO is famed for its combat experience, and that reputation does hold up very, very true. Now, I will say I do recommend choosing a class that you think looks cool, but definitely keep APM in mind, because certain classes will take a lot of keystrokes to play, others don't take nearly as much. So, depending on your ability to do that, you're going to want to play a class that is more tailored to your expectations. So I do have a guide for good classes for beginners, so also will be there on my YouTube channel. The game also does have beautiful graphics with an awesome photo mode. The graphics in BDO, even though the game came out in 2014, like the graphics still to this day are absolutely amazing in my opinion. And, the remastered mode as well looks super insanely good. But they've also added a feature like it's called AMD FSR. So lower end PCs can even run in remaster mode with solid FPS. I personally just run in medium because I think game still looks good, and you still get great FPS, and FPS in BDO is very important because of how fast-paced the combat is. You need to make sure that you are executing certain actions on time. So if you do want to know what my graphics are, I again have a guide on my YouTube channel. Now, BDO also has an old school MMO feel. You have engaging life skills, needing to drink water in the desert during the day to keep cool, tea at night to keep warm, having to feed horses, your pets, your workers, needing to train your character's breath by running to increase stamina, or strength by carrying a heavy backpack. BDO has a lot of these old school MMO elements to it, and I think a lot of players will really like them. Also, BDO has a much better main quest now than it used to be. The main quest used to be very limiting, but nowadays it is much better. The main quest and suggested quests from the Black Spirit, who is basically your guide for the main quest line, act as an interface for certain systems, and they really help guide your early journey and help you learn about the game world, level fast, and get a ton of free things along the way. Now, don't get me wrong, the story of the main quest definitely leaves a lot to be desired, but it is still better than it used to be. Now, if maybe you're not the biggest fan of grinding during the leveling process, you can do traditional side quests that do give you solid experience. You can level up to nearly the soft cap by just doing quests. You don't need to feel forced to grind early on. With a certain in-game item called the Chenga Tome that you can unlock by doing a certain quest line, the experience gained from quests is increased dramatically, allowing you to quest your way successfully to level 61. However, do not expect groundbreaking story from these side quests, as they are quite dry. There's also tons of events and free rewards in BDO already. BDO has a ton of events, and all of those events, you can get a ton of value in terms of rewards by simply just logging in. BDO really does give you a lot of free stuff for these events, so definitely gives you a lot of reasons to log in, play every day, and get these extra bonuses to help progress your account. Another cool thing is that most gear is not bind on pickup, which means that when you're done with a piece of gear, you can resell it on the marketplace to recoup some of your original investment, depending on the piece. Some pieces are bind on account, don't get me wrong, but a lot are not, so you can easily recoup that investment when you're done with the piece and want to upgrade. Now, like I said, BDO has a massive class selection. As I mentioned earlier, there are 27 classes, and the classes all have Succession and Awakening skill lines. And the game has a ton of playstyles to choose from. Now, even though the classes are gender locked, like I mentioned earlier, it's not the end of the world, because oftentimes a class will have a male and female counterpart. So, for example, there's the Witch and the Wizard, the Ninja and the Kuno, the Musa and the Meiwa. The classes play and are incredibly similar, but you can choose which one of the sexes that you want to play. Now, there is a huge focus on PvP in BDO, and now for many people that may be a con, but for me it's a pro. Not many of the current big MMOs out there really focus on or frankly care about PvP, and in BDO, PvP is a big part of the end game. And combined with the combat system, I personally think it makes for a really great experience. Now, if you're not a PvPer though, you do not have to worry. There's still an overwhelming amount of stuff to do in this game that's not PvP related, so you don't have to worry about that if you do want to engage in the mob grinding PvE side, the life skills, and just the gear progression. Now, you can also always be doing something even while you're AFK. You can set your character up to fish, process items, train breath or strength, gain experience, and a bunch of other things while you are away from your computer. You can minimize the game to your system tray during that time as well to help reduce the amount of stress it puts on your PC's resources. However, while AFK money making in the past was really, really good, nowadays it's not nearly as profitable as active grinding. So I know a lot of times when you hear old opinions about BDO, it's oh my god, you have to leave your computer on 24/7, but that's not really the case anymore. Active grinding has just completely blown passive AFK money making stuff out of the water, so that's not really something you really have to worry about. Like I mentioned earlier, BDO has this thing called season servers that they do sometimes run, which act as a vehicle for new players to catch up, offering accelerated experience gains, a ton of rewards. BDO also has, in general, greatly improved the game's new player experience and catch-up mechanics, making it easier than ever before for a new player to get started in Black Desert Online. Now, gear progression in Black Desert has also been heavily improved. With the add-on of the guaranteed pen, boss armor, and weapon systems, pen is the highest enhancement gear level, as well as the addition of being able to get one guaranteed pen accessory, the gear curve feels way better. BDO's gearing process was always something in the past. You either had to save up a ludicrous amount of silver for your next upgrade, or brave the RNG enhancement system that the game has, which I will go over in a bit in my cons list, that I personally very much dislike. However, there are systems in place now that you can get that highest level of gear enhancement in a much better progression-like fashion, instead of just hoping that you hit the lottery and enhance a piece. You can actually upgrade your Tet armor, which is the second highest level of gear enhancement, progressively over time, and after a certain amount of upgrades, you can turn it into that highly desired pen armor. No RNG, no BS. This, plus the addition of Arena of Solaire giving you an equalized PvP experience, are what personally brought me back to BDO last year, and I've been playing ever since. BDO in the past felt like you made a lot of progression very quickly and then ran face first into a brick wall, where your next upgrade just felt like it was forever away. But now with the new guaranteed armor and weapon systems, and they've added some much needed medium-term progression goals and make the progression curve of the game feel infinitely smoother than it was in the past. Now, my next pro is going to be the life skills. If you like crafting and gathering, BDO is an absolutely amazing game. For those who've never watched any of my content before here on YouTube or on Twitch, I am through and through a combat-focused player, and I very seldomly interact with crafting systems in games unless it will enhance my combat experience in some capacity. However, BDO is one of the only MMOs that I actively engage with the game's life skills because they are that good. There's a lot of depth to the various life skills. They have their own gear progression as well, and it's a very interactive system that I think a lot of people will like. Now, guys, while I can talk about how great BDO is until I'm blue in the face, the game, of course, does have cons as well. Kicking off with my first con, it was also my first pro. It is a sandbox. Now, like I said, there's a lot of freedom, and it always feels like there's something to do, but this can feel really overwhelming for new players who have no idea how to do anything. I know the first week that I played BDO way back when, I logged off every day with a headache because of how much information I feel was being thrown at me and realizing the gravity behind how many systems I needed to work on and progress. Now, this can be mitigated by setting short and long-term goals for yourself, but there's definitely this overwhelming feeling that comes over you when you start playing BDO as a new player. Now, performance-wise, I would say the game runs really well overall as long as you adjust the graphical settings to your system's capabilities. Now, the biggest performance issue that I've noticed with BDO that you pretty much cannot avoid is graphical pop-ins. These can definitely ruin some of the immersion when people and objects just literally pop on your screen out of nowhere. And, like, yeah, changing your graphical settings can help a bit, but it's just a well-known issue with the game that unfortunately there really is no way to work around. Now, another con is that this is going to be a con for many people, not for others. It's a very grindy game. Some people don't mind the grind, but others do. This is a Korean MMO after all, and if you do not like grinding, you are not going to like BDO. However, like I said, I do personally find the grinding enjoyable. You know, you can turn your brain off at certain one-shot spots where you're just killing all the mobs instantaneously. However, if you are looking for that challenge, there are harder spots in the game where you need to respect mechanics and the mob's damage or you will die. So there is very engaging grind spots, but again, if you don't like just mob grinding, I really just don't think BDO will be for you. Now, gear enhancement is my next con. It is a completely RNG system. There is a fail stack system, aka failure protection, that would require its own video to explain, which I do have on my YouTube channel, surprise, surprise. But a quick and dirty version is that you build failure protection for item enhancements when you fail to enhance an item. And those stacks get consumed when you successfully enhance an item. Very similar to Lost Ark if you've played that before. Now, with that being said, it's not like you just build the fail stacks and nothing happens to the original item. This is the one thing I hate about BDO's enhancement. When you fail to upgrade a piece of gear, the gear can actually downgrade in enhancement value. And in the case of accessories, they can be destroyed altogether. Now, certain items can help prevent this, but they are quite expensive, or they just take a lot of the item to actually help prevent the downgrade or destruction of your item. Now, thankfully, the system can be completely avoided by just purchasing whatever upgrades you need directly off the marketplace, or going through the guaranteed pen system. So if you're like, dude, I don't even want to enhance at all, you really, really don't have to. I will say you're gonna need to for the season servers, but season server gear enhancement is incredibly easy, and the percentage chances are very high, and I do have a guide on that on my YouTube channel as well. Now, the next thing is that there's no traditional trading between players. Most things need to go through the marketplace, and few things can be traded directly from player to player. This is to help prevent things like gear boosting, so I get it, but it definitely can be seen as a con for a lot of people. The next con is the gender-locked classes. As explained earlier, this is not a huge deal for some classes, but for others, you are completely locked into the sex that class is. Now, for me, I kind of look at the classes almost like champions, not really like classes like like World of Warcraft, like a warrior, you know? It's like I look like I'm playing with like the Guardian champion, but some people don't want to, you know, some people just want to be able to play a male or female version of a character, which I completely understand. So if you don't like gender-locked classes, then you know, that's going to be something you need to consider. There also is not a lot of traditional endgame PvE. Now, this personally is not a con for me, as I'm more of a PvP-oriented player, but I did want to mention it here in the cons list because I know it's a huge turnoff for many people. BDO does not have many traditional endgame dungeons. Like I said, there's only, I think, really 2 at the moment. There's also no raids. So if you're a fan of that kind of content, and that's the main thing you enjoy doing, I don't think BDO is going to be the right game for you. Now, there are definitely some points of unnecessary friction in Black Desert as well, mainly in regards to cooldowns on things that have no reason to have a cooldown. Now, the biggest one that I can think of just off the top of my head is the 10-minute cooldown on swapping your skill profiles. So you can make like a PvP skill profile or a PvE skill profile, but for whatever reason, you have to wait 10 minutes before you swap them. Like, and now in theory, you might go, oh, well, that makes sense. So people can't swap skills and add-ons on the fly based on who they're fighting. But when you learn that you can really only do this in a safe zone, it makes no sense. There are some other things like this in BDO 2, just unnecessary friction, and don't get me wrong, these are not major enough that I would not play because of them, but they're definitely annoying enough that they deserve to be listed as a con here in this video. Now, the next con I have is that the lore and background information to this game is very poorly explained. It can be very hard to feel tied into the game world and some of the NPCs you interact with because it is not entirely clear how everything comes together. While the main story has improved a lot functionally, from a lore and story perspective, it is still super duper lacking. Now, the final thing, guys, before we get into the should you play part of this video, the elephant in the room when people think about BDO is BDO pay to win. BDO's monetization model is always a hot topic when it comes to the game, and there are a lot of old, outdated, and jaded opinions on this topic. So I want to give you my 2 cents on how I feel about it, and then it's up to you to decide from there. Most items that you can purchase on the Pearl Shop, which is the game's microtransaction shop, can be bought on the marketplace with in-game silver, very similarly to Star Wars The Old Republic. So there is a way to buy real money items with in-game currency. BDO also does have a very low buy-in price of only $8 to $10 US, or sometimes completely free, and all content that is released is free with your purchase of the game. You never have to spend money on the game for a piece of content ever, which means that all money spent on BDO after your initial purchase will be on microtransactions. Now, the Pearl Shop has a lot on it, but only 2 things, in my opinion, are mandatory to spend real money on. That is the tent to allow you to do remote repairs and have a remote vendor, as well as a value pack, which is essentially this game's subscription. However, you can place orders for the value pack on the marketplace, so you could always keep a rolling pre-order on this if you so choose. Past that, most things that you would want to buy are kind of optional. In the past, you needed to buy inventory, weight, pets, maids, butlers. It was kind of ridiculous, but nowadays so much of these things are given completely for free from login rewards, events, or as part of the main quest line. So the amount of money that you need to spend on BDO is way lower than it's ever been. Like, for example, if you do the main quest line, you will finish it with a full suite of pets to do your auto looting, and then you could buy pets off of the marketplace to start enhancing them. They've also started giving out weight and inventory exchange coupons, so if you've played in the past, invested money into upgrading a character's weight and inventory, and you don't play it anymore, you can transfer it to another character. Now, I almost wish you could buy those regularly, but they just give them out as a reward, login rewards from time to time. So that is good, though, that they do give them out. Now, don't get me wrong. Their monetization is not perfect. Certain things in this game that are character specific have no business being character specific. For example, the Celestial Horn, which lets you call your horse from as far as you want, is character specific. Like, why do I have to buy one for every single character I have? It just feels very unnecessary. Same thing with like the ferry system. The ferry system in the game is horrific for free-to-play players. Like, the ferry is a very important part of your account progression, and you kind of have to like spend money to basically make your way through it in a reasonable time frame. And it also does stink that fashion inside the game is basically non-existent outside of microtransactions. But I personally feel that nowadays, if you consider how much you spend on literally any other MMO, World of Warcraft, Elder Scrolls Online, if you spent that same amount of money inside a BDO, you would be spending more than enough money to have a very fulfilling experience inside the game. Now, with all of that being said, don't get me wrong, you can still whale out on Black Desert. There is no denying that. You can drop a ton of money, buy a ton of costumes, you can melt them down for the Cron items, which allow you to tap RNG gear enhancements to get gear upgrades, but they prevent that downgrade or destruction like I mentioned earlier. And that is still a thing, and you can, call that pay to win. Absolutely. You could also theoretically sell Pearl Shop items for raw silver and then just purchase your upgrades, but you're looking at a 6-figure investment to make that happen. However, with the new guaranteed pen system in the game, doing the pay-to-win methods of upgrading your gear are way less impactful and way less valuable than they were in the past, since the gear curve for what I would call regular players is now way less steep than it was previously and is much more reasonable. In the past, it felt like, oh my god, I needed to do this, because you would just be stuck on this brick wall, you're stuck at your gear, and you're like, I need to get this enhancement to go through, and I don't want to downgrade, so I need the crons. But like now with the guaranteed enhancements, like the guaranteed pens, like it's just not necessary. And also, this might be a bit of a hot take, but in my opinion, most MMOs nowadays have some level of pay to win or pay to convenience or whatever you want to call it in them. So at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide where your personal line in the sand is, and if the level of monetization that BDO has is something that you can tolerate. If you do want to look into this more, I do have a Pearl Shop guide on my YouTube channel as well, but hopefully this discussion helped you make that decision for yourself. Now, finally, guys, the final section of the video. Should you play Black Desert Online? So if you're a raider or a dungeon diver, you're going to want to completely skip this game. There's no traditional dungeons or raids, so this game's PvE side, there's no traditional theme park or sand park PvE. So if that's what you're looking for, this game does not have it. Now, if you're a PvPer, 100%. BDO's main end game focus is on, I use end game in quotes, is PvP. It'll take you a bit to get there to the point where you're geared enough to hop into the open world PvP, but once you are there, it's an incredibly fun and engaging experience. Also, Tier 1 Node Wars are a great way for newer players to experience PvP, and they have capped attack power and defense levels, and it takes literally no time to get into them. And so this gives new and returning players a very easy way to get into more equal footing PvP against their opponents. We also do have the new Arena of Solaire adding in gear equalized queuable PvP that I think will satisfy a competitive PvP itch very well, and again, it takes basically no time to be able to start playing Arena of Solaire. Now, if you are a solo player, I absolutely recommend BDO. You could do a ton in this game completely by yourself, and the game's quests have some decent stories, although they're not anything to write home about. The game's world design is gorgeous, and it's really easy to just get lost in the game doing a wide variety of things. Personally, I think BDO is a solo player's dream. Crafting, if you're into crafting and that side of MMORPGs, 100%. This game has some of the best crafting, the most in-depth crafting of any MMO I've ever played, and personally, like I said, it's the only MMO I really enjoy crafting in. Now, if you're into housing, at the moment, I'd say it depends. If you want to do housing on top of other things, I'd say give it a go. But if you're looking for it to be like one of your main things that you do, there are definitely better games. And like, don't get me wrong, like the mansion system made some improvements to the games in game housing, but I still think there are better games for people that are really into housing, like The Elder Scrolls Online or Star Wars The Old Republic. The housing in the game is okay, but there are games that just simply do it better. So guys, my overall impression of BDO is obviously very positive, especially compared to the past years. And I think unless you're a hardcore raider or dungeon diver, it's absolutely worth giving a try. My biggest issues with Black Desert Online in the past was its insanely steep learning curve and the lack of queuable PvP for undergeared players, both of which have been addressed. You can also get BDO for a very, very low cost, and there's no harm in giving the game a shot. The game can seem very overwhelming at first, but again, be sure to subscribe and check out my YouTube channel because I have a ton of beginner and new player guides to help you get started on your adventures in BDO. But before we head out today, I do just want to give you one piece of advice if you try to get into BDO. Take it slow. The game is very, very different than traditional Western MMOs. There's a ton to do and a lot of systems, and because it's a Korean MMO, a lot of currencies to figure out what they all do. Take things one thing at a time, set short-term and long-term goals for yourself, and play at your own pace. If you do that, I think you're going to have an amazing time in this game, but if you try to tackle everything at once, you're greatly increasing your odds of burning out early. But guys, with that being said, I just talked man without breathing for 35 minutes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and you did learn if BDO is going to be the right game for you. And if you did enjoy the discussion, I would appreciate if you smacked a like on it. Now, also, I'd like to hear, what is your opinion on BDO? Do you think people should play it, give it another shot, or do you think people should try other games? Feel free to drop your comments down below. Also, guys, if you want to keep up with the BDO content on my channel and check out all of my beginner guides for the game, feel free to hit that sub button as well as hit the bell to keep those notifications on. So I appreciate you all stopping by today. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you all next time.